I worked 16 hours a day sending money to support my parents every month, only to be called an ungrateful son because I didn't give them more. They were stunned when I stopped all support and presented evidence of the true noble purpose of that money. Thank you for being here with me today. I hope you're having a wonderful day wherever you are. I'd love it if you could share in the comments which city or country you're watching from and what time it is there. Now, let's begin our story together. The air in my small apartment always felt thin, even with the window open. It smelled faintly of instant coffee and the loneliness of another evening spent working, not living. That was the price, I told myself. The necessary price. For them. My name is Alex. I'm in my early 30s, living thousands of miles from the quiet Midwest town where I grew up. I left right after college, chasing better job opportunities, better pay. Not for myself, not really. Every extra dollar, every promotion, every late night hunched over a spreadsheet was about sending money home. To Mom and Dad. They weren't wealthy people. Dad worked hard his whole life, but health issues slowed him down in recent years. Mom managed the household budget, which always felt stretched thin. I remembered the worries etched on their faces when I was a kid, the careful way they counted pennies, the things we did without. That memory was a powerful fuel. I didn't want them to worry anymore. I wanted them comfortable, secure, finally able to relax after decades of struggle. So I sent money, a significant portion of my paycheck every single month without fail for nearly 10 years. It started small, just enough to cover an unexpected bill, then grew as my salary did. Soon it became the norm. It paid for groceries, utility bills, repairs on the old house, even helped cover their basic healthcare costs before Medicare fully kicked in. I lived frugally, roommates, secondhand furniture, packed lunches, delayed visits home. My own savings account grew glacially slow, a frustrating crawl compared to the large sums I transferred with a few taps on my phone screen each month. The confirmation email was always a dull ache in my chest, a reminder of another chunk of my present and future being sent away. But then Mom would call, telling me how the new water heater worked like a charm, or Dad would mention being able to afford a new set of tires, and a little warmth would spread through the ache. I was doing good. I was being a good son. That's what mattered. In the back of my mind, I held on to a specific dream, a promise almost. When I was younger, maybe still in high school, we'd driven past a small, overgrown plot of land on the edge of town, near the creek. Mom had sighed, "Oh, wouldn't it be lovely to have a little place out there someday? Quiet, just ours." Dad had agreed, talking about planting a big garden. It was just wistful talk, maybe, but it stuck with me. As I started sending money, that little creekside plot became a symbol. My real goal wasn't just covering bills. It was building something lasting for them. I started setting aside a portion of the money I sent specifically for a retirement fund, a separate account in their name that I tracked, intended for future medical needs, unexpected emergencies, or maybe even to buy that small piece of land someday and build them a little cottage, a quiet place just for them, free and clear. I'd mentioned this idea to them years ago, vaguely, about setting money aside for their future, and they'd seemed touched, agreeing it was a wonderful idea. It was my quiet promise, built brick by painful brick with my sacrifices, a future I envisioned for their peace. I held on to the thought of that little creek, that quiet corner of the world, like a secret promise, a light at the end of the tunnel. My sister, Sarah, lived closer to home. She was a few years older than me, always Mom and Dad's favorite, it seemed. She had a knack for getting what she wanted without much effort, gliding through life on charm and expectation. While I was sending money home, she was building her local life, getting married, focusing on appearances. When I'd call, Mom and Dad would always fill me in on Sarah's latest achievement, her new car, her perfectly decorated house, her active social life. There was always a subtle comparison, a quiet implication that her way of being a good daughter involved being present, being successful in their eyes, rather than making the kind of financial sacrifices I was. Sarah herself was friendly enough on the surface, but there was always a slight edge, a condescending tone when she talked about my generosity. It felt less like a compliment and more like she was marveling at my foolishness or perhaps resenting that the money wasn't flowing through her somehow. "Alex is so good to us," she'd say, the words sweet but the look in her eyes sharp. as if measuring me. The subtle hints of dissatisfaction from my parents began to grow louder. The phone calls shifted. Less gratitude for the money received, more focus on what they didn't have or what others did. Your cousin Mark just helped his parents put in a swimming pool. The Johnsons next door are going to Hawaii. Their kids paid for it. My contributions, which ate up a significant chunk of my income, were increasingly framed not as helpful support, but as a minimum requirement that I was barely meeting. It's just so expensive here, Alex. Everything keeps going up. My chest would tighten, a familiar coil of guilt and frustration. I was doing everything I could. I was living on a shoestring. What more did they want? Over time, their requests grew bolder, less about necessities and more about keeping up appearances. They needed money for a new, expensive landscaping project they saw on a TV show. They wanted a brand new, top-of-the-line refrigerator when the old one was perfectly functional. When I hesitated, asking if these things were really needed, the tone would shift instantly. The sighs would deepen. The voices would become thin with disappointment. "We thought you wanted us to be comfortable," Mom would say, her voice dripping with hurt. "After everything we did for you, raised you, fed you, put a roof over your head, is this how you repay us?" That was when the words started appearing, like a small, sharp stone thrown into clear water. "Ungrateful. You're being very ungrateful, Alex," Dad said at first, after I gently pushed back on funding a new sunroom that cost more than my annual salary. "We ask for this one thing and you question us? After all we've done." The word hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Ungrateful. Me, who sent money home every month, who sacrificed my own comfort, my own future plans, who lived 1,000 miles away missing holidays and birthdays because I was working to send more. It didn't make sense. Twisted something inside me. It was the first crack in the foundation of what I thought our family was. Sarah didn't help. She seemed to amplify their dissatisfaction. "Mom and Dad are just trying to enjoy their later years, Alex," she'd say, her voice syrupy sweet on the phone. "It's not asking much to help them be comfortable, is it? It's their due." Her words felt like tiny needles poking at my guilt. I suspected she was subtly encouraging their demands, maybe even benefiting from them, receiving gifts or having her own needs covered by the money I was sending. She always had a way of making my genuine efforts feel inadequate, while her superficial gestures were praised lavishly. She craved the spotlight, the approval, and seemed to resent that my financial contributions gave me a kind of importance she couldn't easily match. Then came the demand that changed everything. It didn't come out of the blue, but it felt like a sudden, icy shockwave. My parents called, their voices full of an artificial excitement that set my teeth on edge. "Alex, we have a wonderful opportunity," Mom chirped. "Yeah, son, it's a real winner," Dad added. "Your Uncle Bob told us about it, this investment." My Uncle Bob, a man known for chasing get-rich-quick schemes that inevitably imploded. My stomach clenched. "It requires some capital, though," Mom continued, her tone turning slightly hesitant, like someone about to spring a trap. "And we were thinking, that little piece of land you bought, the one by the creek." My heart stopped. The land. My land. The symbol of my quiet promise. The anchor for my noble purpose retirement dream for them. "Sell it, Alex," Dad said, the hesitation gone, replaced by a pushy eagerness. "Sell it and send us the money for this investment. It'll make us all a fortune. More than enough to build something even better than that little cottage." I couldn't speak. My mind reeled. Sell that land? The one place I had painstakingly saved for, the one tangible piece of the future I envisioned for their peace and security? To fund Uncle Bob's latest guaranteed failure? "It's just sitting there, Alex," Mom said, a hint of impatience creeping in. "Not doing anything. This investment is time-sensitive." "Sarah thinks it's a great idea," Dad added, throwing in Sarah's approval like it was the final, irrefutable argument. That's when it hit me. A cold, hard truth that landed like a physical blow. They didn't see the land as the culmination of my selfless efforts for their long-term peace. They didn't see my noble purpose. They just saw an asset, something I owned but they felt entitled to, another resource to be liquidated for their immediate desires or questionable schemes. The investment was just an excuse. They weren't grateful for my support. They felt entitled to my entire financial capacity, my past sacrifices, and my future security. The word ungrateful echoed in my head, but this time it didn't sting with guilt. It burned with indignation. They were calling me ungrateful while demanding I sell the very foundation of a selfless future I had planned for them. It was a complete inversion of reality. The realization was a kick in the gut, stealing the air from my lungs. The years of sacrifice, the loneliness, the missed opportunities, they hadn't been building security. They had been enabling exploitation. My rock bottom wasn't about them calling me names. It was this chilling realization of their true nature and the sheer scale of their manipulation, targeting the deepest, most selfless part of my efforts. I felt like a fool, a naive child who had given everything only to be shown he was just a resource to be bled dry. I slumped into my chair, the silence on the phone line thick with their waiting expectation. Was this all I was to them? A walking ATM? A means to an end? The thought was crushing. I felt utterly alone and foolish, the weight of years of misplaced trust pressing down on me. But as the silence stretched, something shifted. The crushing weight didn't break me, solidified me. The pain was too sharp, too violating to just endure. It demanded action. In that moment of absolute despair, a cold, clear resolve settled over me. I wouldn't just be hurt anymore. I would be strategic. I ended that call quickly, giving a non-committal answer about thinking about it. My hands were shaking, but my mind was suddenly clear. I wasn't just protecting my land anymore. I was protecting myself, my dignity, and the truth of my intentions. My first step was quiet, measured. I didn't confront them yet. Instead, I started gathering everything. Every bank statement showing the money transferred. Every email or text where they mentioned bills I'd paid or expenses I'd covered. I dug through old digital files, searching for any mention, any hint of my original plan for the retirement fund or the idea of the land for their future peace. I found old emails from years ago where I'd tentatively mentioned saving for their future needs and their brief, positive responses. I found receipts for specific home repairs I paid for directly, contrasting with their vague claims of needing money for living expenses. I also started digging into the investment they mentioned. A quick search revealed Uncle Bob's long history of failed ventures and, more damningly, some recent news about a specific scheme he was pushing, one flagged as potentially fraudulent, and the texts from Sarah urging them to get quick cash for this sure thing started to make chilling sense. She wasn't just benefiting. She might be actively pushing them into something risky, maybe even getting a cut, and seeing my land as the easiest way to get the funds. My sister, the favored one, was complicit in trying to exploit my hard work and selfless plans for her own gain or misguided ambition. The betrayal felt even deeper, a twist of the knife from someone I should have been able to trust, or at least expect neutrality from. I consulted a lawyer, just for an hour, a consultation on protecting assets from potential family disputes. It felt strange, clinical, discussing my family dynamics with a stranger in a sterile office that smelled of lemon polish and old paper. The lawyer listened patiently, his expression unreadable. He confirmed that as the land was in my name, they couldn't force me to sell. He also gave me advice on documenting financial transfers and communications, reinforcing that what I was already doing was the right approach. It wasn't about winning a legal battle yet. It was about having the facts, the undeniable proof. The tension built over the next few weeks. They called pushing about the land, their voices growing sharper, more demanding. I deflected, saying I was looking into options, buying time. Sarah sent me a text. Mom and Dad are really disappointed you're being difficult about the land. It's not fair to them. Her words, meant to guilt trip, now just felt hollow and transparent. I decided to confront them at Thanksgiving. It felt like the right setting, the traditional family gathering, the time meant for gratitude and togetherness, the perfect backdrop to expose the hollowness of their demands. It would be at the family home, a place filled with a lifetime of memories, now tainted by doubt. I packed my bag, including a carefully organized folder of documents. My hands trembled as I zipped it shut, not from fear, but from the weight of what I was about to do. Walking into the house felt like stepping into a different dimension. The smell of roasted turkey and pumpkin pie was the same, comforting and familiar, but the air inside was thick with unspoken tension. Sarah was already there, chatting brightly with Mom, helping set the table. Dad was watching a football game, but his eyes flicked towards me the moment I entered. Forced smiles were plastered on everyone's faces. The small talk was excruciating. Every question about my life felt like a veiled probe into my finances. Sarah made a comment about how brave I was living so far away, adding, "Not sure I could handle being so independent." The subtle jab wasn't lost on me. Dinner was a minefield. They brought up the investment opportunity casually at first, testing the waters. Then, Mom turned to me, her smile fixed. "So, Alex, have you given more thought to helping us out with that land?" Dad leaned forward, his voice low but insistent. "We need to move fast on this, son. It's a good deal." Sarah nodded along, adding, "It really could change things for them, Alex. A son should want that for his parents." The knot in my stomach tightened, but my resolve held. This was it, the moment I had dreaded and prepared for. I looked at their faces, the expectant smiles, the underlying impatience, Sarah's calculating gaze. I took a deep breath. "Mom, Dad," I started, keeping my voice low and steady, fighting the tremor that wanted to take hold. "I've thought about it a lot." Their smiles widened, anticipatory. They thought I was about to cave. "I bought that land for a reason," I continued, my voice gaining strength. "And I've sent you money for years for a reason." I looked from Mom to Dad, then briefly at Sarah. Not just for bills, not just for things. I did it because I believed in a promise. The promise of security, of peace for you both after working so hard. I wanted to build something real, something lasting. That land, the money I set aside, that was for a retirement fund, for future needs, maybe that little place by the creek you always dreamed of. That was my noble purpose. Silence. Their smiles wavered, confusion replacing expectation. Sarah stopped arranging her silverware. What are you talking about, Alex?" Mom stammered. "Your noble purpose was giving us money when we needed it," Dad said, his voice rising, anger flashing in his eyes. "This investment is our future now." Sarah interjected, her voice sharp. "Stop making things up." "I'm not making things up," I said, my voice calm, a stark contrast to their rising panic. I reached down beside my chair and picked up the folder. I kept records. I laid the folder on the table. It felt heavy with years of unspoken truths. "Here," I said, opening it to the first section. "Bank statements. 10 years of transfers. You can see the amounts. A significant portion of everything I earned." I turned to the next section. "Here are receipts you sent me over the years, for things I paid for directly, the new furnace in 18, the roof repair in 20, Dad's medical bills last year. Things you said the money was for." I paused. "But I also have your own emails. From years ago, when I first started making good money. When I told you I wanted to set something aside for your future, something significant, maybe buy that land by the creek for you. And you said it was a wonderful idea. You encouraged it." I slid a printout of one of those old emails across the table. Their faces were paling. "That's not what this is about," Mom cried, her voice shrill. "This is about you not helping us now. We need the money from the land for this investment. It's a guaranteed return." "Is it?" I asked, my voice cutting through her panic. I turned to another section of the folder. I looked into this investment, Mom, Dad, the one Uncle Bob is pushing, and the one Sarah seems very enthusiastic about. I looked directly at Sarah, who suddenly seemed fascinated by her plate. "It looks an awful lot like a pyramid scheme, or worse, a scam. I have articles here, warnings from financial regulators. It's not a guaranteed return. It's a way to lose everything." Sarah gasped, a sharp, theatrical sound. How dare you, Alex? Trying to make things up about me. Am I? I asked, my gaze holding hers. I pulled out a printout of a text conversation. This is a conversation between Sarah and Mom, just a few weeks ago. Sarah, you said, just get Alex to sell that dumb land. It's the quickest cash. My friend says this thing is huge, and I get a cut for bringing people in. You wanted me to sell the land I bought for their security, so you could get a commission on a scam that would likely lose them everything I've ever sent. Silence fell over the table, thick and heavy, broken only by the ticking clock on the wall. My parents stared at the texts, then at Sarah, then at me. Sarah's face was white, her eyes darting, trapped. The air felt cold, like all the warmth had been sucked out of the room. Relatives who had been quietly eating now looked up, their expressions ranging from shock to discomfort to dawning understanding. You were going to use the money from the land I bought as a symbol of my decade of sacrifice, my noble purpose plan for your peace and security, to fund a likely scam suggested by Sarah? So she could get a cut? I asked, my voice breaking slightly on the last word. And you call me ungrateful? Mom started to cry, but there were no tears, just gasping sobs. Dad's face was a mask of fury and humiliation. Sarah pushed back from the table, scraping her chair loudly. This is unbelievable, she muttered, but her voice lacked conviction. I have given you a decade of my life, of my hard work, of my financial security, because I loved you and wanted you to be safe and comfortable, I said, my voice firm despite the pain tearing through me. My intention was to build a future for you, based on a promise we shared. You took my sacrifice, saw it only as an endless resource, demanded more and more, and tried to use the most significant symbol of my long-term love and planning for your immediate greed and a fraudulent scheme, potentially orchestrated by your favored child. I looked directly at my parents. You called me ungrateful, but you were the ones exploiting me. I stood up, the folder still on the table. This is where it ends, I said, my voice clear and strong, resonating in the silent room. The money stops now, all of it. I will not be selling my land. I will not be funding scams. And I will not be called ungrateful for refusing to be exploited. I looked around the table at the stunned faces, the shattered social mask of my family laid bare by simple documents and undeniable truth. It was the hardest, most terrifying thing I had ever done, and also the most liberating. The room erupted into chaos as I turned and walked away. Shouting followed me, a mix of angry accusations from my parents and Sarah, and hushed, uncomfortable murmurs from others. I didn't look back. The days and weeks that followed were a whirlwind of emotional fallout and practical consequences. My parents, reeling from the public humiliation and the loss of their cash cow, didn't retreat quietly. Fueled by Sarah, they launched a campaign of defamation. They called relatives, spread rumors on social media, twisting the story to make me sound like a cruel, heartless son who had suddenly abandoned his poor, elderly parents after manipulating them. He always was a strange one, I heard one relative repeat, echoing something my mother must have said. The pain of their betrayal was compounded by the pain of seeing people I knew choose to believe their lies or simply avoid me because the situation was too messy. Sarah was particularly vicious online, posting veiled references to family loyalty and toxic people who abandon you. It was a classic tactic, project their own behavior onto the victim. It hurt deeply seeing their manipulative signature play out on a wider stage. But I held my ground. I didn't engage in their online drama or answer their angry, guilt-tripping calls and texts, which eventually stopped when they realized I wouldn't break. My lawyer advised me on documenting their defamation, just in case, but I decided my peace was more important than fighting them in the mud. I blocked them on social media, creating a boundary I should have set years ago. It felt brutal, severing ties so completely, like amputating a limb that was slowly poisoning the rest of my body. The phantom aches of guilt and obligation lingered, but they were slowly replaced by a quiet sense of self-preservation. The consequences for them were swift and real. Without my money, they struggled. The questionable investment scheme they wanted to join likely fell apart. Perhaps because they couldn't raise the capital from me, or perhaps it imploded on its own as scams tend to do. I heard whispers that Sarah had gotten into financial trouble herself, maybe because of her involvement in the scheme or simply due to her own poor financial habits. The social mask they had worn for so long cracked. People in town started asking questions, putting together pieces, seeing past the facade of the perfect family. My quiet presentation of evidence, while not a legal case, had served as a public exposé, or at least sowed seeds of doubt that grew in the fertile ground of small-town gossip. My own journey was far from easy. There was grief, grieving the idea of the family I thought I had, mourning the love I believed was unconditional but turned out to be transactional. There were days the guilt tried to creep back in, whispering that I had been too harsh. But then I would remember the demand about the land, the ungrateful accusations, Sarah's cold calculation, and the evidence of their deceit. That clear, hard truth was my anchor. I leaned on my chosen family. My friend from college, who had always listened patiently to my worries about my parents, offered unwavering support. The distant relative, who had quietly reached out after Thanksgiving to say she had always suspected my parents were difficult, became a source of comfort and validation. I started therapy, processing years of ingrained obligation and emotional manipulation. It was painful work, peeling back layers of guilt and redefining my own worth outside of my ability to provide financially for others. The money I had been sending, the sacrifice I had made, it was mine again. The land by the creek was still mine. I decided not to build a cottage there for them. Instead, I started thinking about what I wanted. I used a portion of the saved funds for a down payment on a small condo in my city. My own space, my own foundation, built with my own hard work. The land, the symbol of my shattered dream for them, I decided to keep for now. Maybe someday I'd build something there, or maybe I'd just visit the creek and remember that I had saved it, and myself, from being sold off for someone else's greed. Standing here now, in my own place, built with my own resources, the air feels lighter. There are still scars, reminders of the years spent trying to fill a bottomless well of expectation and battling a love that came with a price tag. But there is also peace. I learned that family isn't defined solely by blood, but by respect, honesty, and unconditional regard. I learned the critical importance of boundaries, that protecting yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary for survival and well-being. I learned that the truth, however painful, has a power that manipulation cannot stand against in the end. And I learned that reclaiming your self-respect is the most valuable asset you can ever possess. The view from here, standing on my own ground, is worth everything. Have you ever had to choose yourself over toxic family expectations? What did you learn about true family?